Welcome to the Hour of Power
Woo!
episode podcast thingy.
Are
Wow,
you
it's been
are
a
you
while.
changing the name of the
Uh,
podcast?
don't worry about it. Welcome
Okay.
to episode 24,
Woo!
where we will be examining the craziest of climbers in a
Yes.
series that's way bigger than you thought it was, guaranteed. First things first, I'm still Gibbon. I may sound a little bit different, don't worry about it. Uh,
And I'm still Milo, and I probably sound the same.
yeah, I think so.
It has been a while since our last episode,
It has.
but that's
Oh
okay.
lordy, when was our last episode?
Oh, I don't want to look it up, but I'm going to.
Oh, survey
October
says.
last year.
Oh God, yeah, it's been a minute.
That's more than 6 months.
More than 6 months, lordy.
But that's okay. Not much
Yeah,
has been going on, as you'll see in our news section. We've got a few items.
yep, yep. Uh, yeah. Why don't you start us off on the news?
Okay. First item on the news from December of last year. What is this? Guidebook, blah
I
blah 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 blah.
believe it is the So in
Sorry.
the if I'm remembering correctly, in the
Mm.
Donkey Kong 94 Player's Guide, there were excerpts. I don't know what the correct term for this would be. Little samples of puzzle pieces from this DK94 puzzle. Several copies of the actual puzzle, of which they gave away
Mm.
as a special prize for something or other.
Right, right. Yeah, we've got a tweet here from a user called Arkhound who says that
Yeah,
the guide contained a contest to win a 54-piece puzzle.
yeah, that's the
That
one.
was never sold. Only 1,000 sets were made for this contest, and to their knowledge, no one has ever sold their winning
Yeah,
copy of this online.
I've never seen this on eBay or Yahoo auctions or anything. So yeah.
Is this art also exclusive to the puzzle?
Um, I want to say no, but I'm not 100% certain.
Yeah, I don't recognize it. It's by Benimaru Ito, who,
Um, it's definitely the same art style that's in the guide because that
mm,
person also did art for the guide.
yeah, especially the front cover.
It might just be this sample page with the pieces missing
Hmm.
from the tweet that was scanned out of the guide. That is where I've seen that before, maybe.
Right,
Um,
because you own the guide.
yes.
Yes.
And trust me, if I'd found a copy of this puzzle, I would own it. So,
Well, very nice. I always love seeing new Benimaru Ito art. He's the guy who
mhm.
did the Star Fox and Super Metroid comics for Nintendo Power.
Yeah,
Among other things, he did an Earthbound one for Japan.
nice.
Okay, so next item.
The next item was after friend of the show, Chris Alcock, of rare fame,
Mm.
writer on Sea of Thieves, listened to our series on the Saturday Supercade and other Mario cartoons. He informed us that since our last recording on the subject, another episode of the Saturday Supercade had been found. So now there exists on YouTube The Incredible Shrinking Ape, which was not around when we did those recordings.
Yeah, so weren't able to cover it. Although, for me, the big news item here is that Chris Alcock listens to our show. That's great. That's amazing. Hello,
Yeah.
Chris. So the premise of this episode is basically that Donkey Kong, along with Mario and Pauline, got shrunk somehow, and I'll have a lot of wacky shenanigans in a toy shop. Am I
Yeah, it's
getting this
it's
right?
I think it's required by law that every Saturday morning cartoon show has a like Journey to the Center of Man or shrink like a We're Shrunk episode,
Yep.
and yeah, it's one of those tropes you have to hit up. Anime has its own tropes. American cartoons have their own tropes.
Yeah, I think
So,
they use that trope really heavily in the show Ozzy and Drix.
yep,
Lol, 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 lol. That's just a
lol,
little
lol, lol,
joke
lol,
for
lol.
you.
Yeah,
Um, um, yeah, so
We're
it's always
having
fun
fun with
when
it. It's okay.
it's always fun when lost media gets found, especially when it's relevant to our interests.
Okay, getting slightly more recent. Uh,
Yes, the next item is from a Twitter account that I follow that does a lot of work for video game preservation and stuff like that. It's Forest of Illusion.
mm-hmm.
And they posted in September of last year a design document for the original Donkey Kong from a point before it had gotten the Donkey Kong branding when it was still in development as a Popeye game.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see. A lot of this is like rough sketch,
Mm.
and you can tell that maybe they were using a ruler or something for some of the straight lines.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a couple sections here where they've sort of roughed out the pixel map for Olive Oil, Popeye, and Bluto,
Yeah, I wasn't
and
sure
it's
how they'd
like,
done that. It's
yeah, I
it's
don't
not
know. I'm not sure on that point.
mm, it is
Um,
signed by Miyamoto. I remember there's some early sketches where he's used graph paper to um,
mm.
give a guide to where the pixel, boundaries are and stuff.
And this does look photocopied, so yeah, it could have been
Yes,
on graph paper originally, for all we know.
who knows?
So yeah.
But yeah, the level design looks pretty similar to Donkey Kong 25 meters.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, I don't really know how development would have worked in those days, but
The
yeah,
concept
it's just
for the
interesting.
the basic gameplay and level layouts were there from the
Yeah,
beginning, and
yes, that's
really they just reskinned the characters and
right.
tweaked a few things.
Yep.
But hey, that's how these things work sometimes.
hmm there are. They do note in a follow-up tweet that there's game mechanics that didn't make it to the final Donkey Kong product, such as bombs
Mm.
littered around that
Ooh.
are on fire, stuff like that.
I do wonder why nobody's ever reskinned the Popeye arcade game that did get made a few years later as a Donkey Kong game. But yeah, who knows? I suppose you'd need to do like Sweet Pea obviously just becomes Donkey Kong Jr. or
hmm
something. But who does the Sea Hag become?
Stanley.
I remember the last time I was thinking about this, I made up a new character of like Pauline's grandma who's throwing flower pots at Mario or something.
I like that.
Uh,
I like that a lot.
old Italian granny. Um, yeah. So that's fun to look at. From a different account we follow, Super Mario Broth, more
Supper Mario
recently
broth.
made it right. You are. There is a second P in there. Nice. Supper Mario Broth. Much more recently, the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe came out earlier this month, I think. And one of the systems it came out on was the Nintendo Switch. And as an Easter egg in that version of the game, the old timey newspaper in the office has had some adjustments made to it. So now, it instead of the New York Times, it is the New Donk Times, and some of the articles featured on it talk about you will not believe how many bananas this ape has been hoarding for years. And also 50% off designer hats, and the hats look very familiar. Um, it makes a note that a small creature owns the other 50% of the hat. So, but yeah, new Donk Times, Donkey Kong references, Stanley Parable.
Mm,
Yeah,
that's cool.
yeah, it is.
So is the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe on the games list on DK Goda now then?
Oh, I don't know. Is it? It probably
Uh,
goes in. I think I have a section at the end of the list for like things that with references and stuff. I don't know. I've kind of separated it out into like types of connection.
mm.
We should at least mention it, if nothing else. But also, we found out some news
Oh yeah, this last
just now
item
before we stared recording.
is very late breaking news. So every month, or is it every month, or have they
Oh,
slackened?
I don't know if it's every month, but it's
Well,
regular. It's
yeah,
semi-regular.
every now and then, Nintendo adds a couple extra games to their, um, like, their ostensible virtual console replacement, which is the
Mm-hmm.
Switch Online Nintendo Entertainment System and Super Nintendo Entertainment System app thing. I don't know what it's called, but
Yeah, it's just Nintendo Switch Online or
sure.
something.
It's the one where you can play the classic games if you're
Yeah.
subscribed to the service. And yeah, one of the games that they've just added today or tomorrow or whatever is Pinball for the NES, which is a game that we cover. It in the bonus rooms between like pinball rounds. There's a little place where Mario is holding a girder, and it's a little brick breaker type thing, and Pauline's there too.
Yep. It's a
So
fun little game.
yeah, NES Pinball. It's a Donkey Kong arcade era game, and
Mm-hmm.
now it is on the Switch.
Yep. Also being added is Umihara Kawase, which we have
Mm,
talked about previously on the show, which isn't
yes.
directly related to anything we cover on this site, but we just like it that much. So,
Yeah, note that that's only in the Japanese version. Although it's easy to make a Japanese account on your Switch and get the app that way.
relatively easy. Still more hassle than I want to go through, but yes,
Oh,
relatively easy.
well,
Um, I'll probably do it eventually.
you should.
As we mentioned at the top of the episode, we will be covering the Crazy Climber series today. Let's see. Okay, where should we just start at the beginning? Is that a good place to start?
That's a very good place to start.
Okay, so in the days of yore, before Donkey Kong even existed, there came a game in the arcades from Jorudan?
Yeah, so it's a Nichibutsu game. That's a company also known as Nihon Busan.
Yeah.
And they contracted Jorudan to develop the game in much the same way that Nintendo
Yeah.
contracted Ikegami Tsushinki to develop
Because
to
that's just
write
how
Donkey
things
Kong.
worked back in the day.
Yep.
Because arcade games were still really niche, and so the the companies that produced them contracted out the actual development.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, 1980, this game called Crazy Climber comes out. Very unique game then, still a very unique game today. There's not a whole lot of things that emulate it.
Mm.
The basic premise is you are a dude climbing up a skyscraper to the top to catch a helicopter. The cabinet art and flyers for the game depict the skyscrapers being on fire and rescue crews being about. This is not reflected in game at all.
Yeah, there's
um,
enough hazards without a fire chasing you from below, to be honest.
yep. In fact, in game, you get more of the impression that this dude is just some crazy guy scaling a building,
Mm.
which is why the residents are sticking their heads out the window and throwing shit at him.
Yeah, I see him described sometimes as a daredevil who's just doing it for a lark.
Mm-hmm. People do this in real life.
Mm. Free climbing.
The controls were really simple and really great.
I guess.
They're simplistic in nature. There's two control sticks, and one of them controls the left hand, and one of them controls the right hand, and
She
you have to
she says they're
clop
simple,
your
but
way up the building.
I've been trying all morning to get my head around them and struggling a lot.
Listen, I played a lot of QWOP back in the
Yes,
day.
yes. This whole like controlling individual limbs separately thing is something that's been revived recently in indie games like Co-op, as you say, by Ben and
Hmm.
Foddy.
There's some Mario Party mini games that sort of mimic the basic
Okay.
concept, but they don't get as in depth with it as Crazy Climber does. Crazy Climber actually gets really in depth with it because you have 8 directional input on each stick, and
Mm,
you can reach. So if you want to go to the left or right, you need to like move yourself over one hand at a time. You have to like, as if you were actually gripping the ledge of a thing, you have to sort of move one hand over and then pull yourself over. If you want to go up, you move one hand up and then you get a grip with the other hand, and then you pull the sticks down to sort of emulate pulling yourself up to the
mm,
next ledge. And if you want to go back down for whatever reason, you have to kind of move your arms out and then down and then like to waist level to get a grip, and then to move the sticks up to like simulate pushing yourself back down a level.
yeah,
And
it's
yeah,
fascinating just how much control you have over your individual hands.
it's kind of amazing. It's more detailed climbing controls than Assassin's Creed.
Yeah,
um
for sure. That's really streamlined.
mhm.
I think to do speed climbing in this, the best way is to rapidly alternate up and down on each one, but in the
Yeah,
opposite
basically.
direction, which is a bit
Hmm.
tricky to get your head around. But I feel like it would be easier on the real arcade machine with the two sticks in your hands
Hmm. Yeah.
compared to the way that you have to do it in a lot of subsequent ports and if you're emulating it and stuff.
Okay. And yeah, that's it. That's the gist of it. Like it's really simple in concept, but it's complex in scope, if that makes sense.
Mm, fascinating game, but why are we covering it?
Yes, why are we covering it? So there's four skyscrapers or four levels, and after you go through all four, the game loops. Only things get harder. And among other things, like people sticking their heads out of windows and throwing shit at you, or them slamming the windows closed on your hands.
Mm,
Two of the major obstacles, or I guess the two major obstacles that are featured on the cover art for, I think, all but one entry in this series, are a giant condor
hmm.
that will poop on you, and B,
Sometimes it drops eggs.
yeah, sometimes it drops eggs, and B, a giant King Kong knockoff who
Mm-hmm.
will beat his chest, attempt to punch you, and will fling like dumbbells and broken off girders down at you.
Mm-hmm. Although if you find the gorilla in game, you'd be forgiven for thinking that it's just some kind of horrible gremlin.
Yeah, it doesn't look great in the first arcade game. It's yeah, it's not good. Um, the
Looks good
graphics
on
were
the flyer
not
art.
great in the 1980 version of this game. Let's put it
Yeah.
that way.
Mm-hmm.
But it was still probably one of the more complex arcade games out there, and it got a lot of attention.
Mm.
And it's often I don't know if it's ever been officially recognized as a source of inspiration for Donkey Kong, but pretty much every single article ever written about Donkey Kong will cite Crazy Climber as a this was probably an inspiration
Mm.
for this game when they were reskinning the Popeye game after shopping it around and it not working out.
Yeah. On the one hand, they're both clearly inspired by King Kong, but
Hmm.
Crazy Climber was actually the third most successful arcade game in Japan that year, like
Yeah.
behind Space Invaders and what was the other one, Pac-Man or something.
Hmm.
But like its impact is bigger than you would think, given how sort of
Hmm.
unknown it is these days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it got a ton of ports to things. At the time, I think it was Atari and some other home consoles of that gen.
Yep, it's on some Japanese home computers like the PC-88.
Yeah. It did get a Famicom port, although not until like half a decade later.
Hmm.
Um, and
We're
that
going to
was
talk about that separately because it's so
we
different.
are going to
They
talk about
change a
that
lot of
separately.
stuff.
But yeah, it was pretty impressive for the time. And so, being a suspected inspiration for Donkey Kong isn't quite enough, but we will build a case for stronger connections here in a minute.
I've got one connection that I noticed.
Oh yeah?
Um, like some arcade games of the era, it uses uh, pre-existing music. So when
Ooh,
you first
okay.
started up, you hear the baby elephant walk,
Mm-hmm.
and the entertainer is also in there. When the gorilla comes on screen, it has its own little theme song, which is the Pink Panther theme,
Mm-hmm.
um, which mirrors Donkey Kong being associated with the
Oh, I've
what's
suddenly
that?
forgotten the name of that leitmotif. I know what you're
Yeah,
talking about, though.
da 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 da
Da,
da.
da. Yeah, everybody knows what we're talking about. It's fine. Moving on. So obviously, a year later, Donkey Kong came out and was massively successful beyond Nintendo's wildest dreams, and which caused them to need to subcontract out European and overstock American machines in the form of Crazy Kong, which we already talked about on a previous episode.
Dragnet.
What? Oh,
Dra-
right, Dragnet.
it was in
Um,
there. I got it. Sorry to interrupt you.
um, Alongside Donkey Kong and Crazy Kong, there were some imitators, the most blatant of which was a game called Rock Climber by Taito, which
Mm.
is it's just the same thing. It's
Except you're on a cliff, yeah.
except you're on a cliff. Like it's just blatantly the same thing. It's kind of crazy how some of those knockoffs get. We talked about it in like the Donkey Kong knockoffs episode, but
Mm.
knockoffs are shameless. Um, at least Nintendo got a little more interesting with them. But yeah, Donkey Kong and then Crazy Kong. The thing about the Crazy Kong machines, though, is that Crazy Kong was not just a European release of Donkey Kong. And we got into this a little bit in a previous episode of the podcast, but Crazy Kong was actually reverse engineered off of the Crazy Climber tech.
Oh.
So it's basically built out of Crazy Climber, and hence the Crazy Kong name. So that's why it's a little different. It looks a little bit different. A lot of people assume it's a bootleg, but it's not. It was
Mm.
officially licensed.
Yep.
And it actually did make some improvements over Donkey Kong. It actually had some track mode animations that actually gave a little bit of story, like with the Kong in the cage doing the thing and escaping and whatnot. So yeah, this was followed by Sky Skipper, which again we already talked about. The little reference to Crazy Kong and Sky Skipper, sort of going full circle from Nintendo over to licensed stuff back to Nintendo, because Sky Skipper then referenced the cage stuff and borrowed that, because Miyamoto purportedly really liked that bit in Crazy Kong. And then, yeah, Donkey Kong did its thing for a few years, and then later on in 85, Nintendo went back to the Crazy Climber well and did Ice Climber, which you may think may be reaching. Maybe that just has a similar name, if not for the fact that the
Mm.
main antagonist of Ice Climber is a giant condor.
Oh, okay. I see what you're doing.
And so, yeah, we've already. I don't actually know if we've detailed Ice Climber connections to the Donkey Kong stuff in a previous episode of the podcast, but I'll just repeat it here in case we haven't. As far as DK Girder is concerned, Ice Climber is in the Donkey Kong family of games. There's a few circumstantial pieces that it shares some enemies with the Donkey Kong Jr. arcade game.
Yeah, the nitpicker bird.
Yeah, the Nitpicker Bird. And at least for Versus Ice Climber, the arcade game that preceded the Famicom home version, um, the flyers for the Versus system would suggest that the stars of Versus Ice Climber are Mario and Luigi. So,
Mm, yes.
yeah,
This is the same flyer that gave us versus ladies golf with who we take to be Pauline, right?
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I think there might actually be another Versus Ice Climber flyer that's just a Versus Ice Climber flyer that suggests it's Mario and Luigi as well.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
But I also believe that ad you're talking about is also further connection. So yeah, Ice Climber can also be grouped into this family of Crazy Climber inspired Donkey Kong stuff. So we have this sort of similar to how Donkey Kong was for Donkey Kong Country. We have this sort of connection that Crazy Climber is for Donkey Kong. um, but then this sort of starts feeding back into the Crazy Climber series a little bit because the gorilla is now when they start making Crazy Climber games again, the gorilla is now referred to as Crazy Kong.
Oh, okay.
And it's like, well, Crazy Kong was made on the Crazy Climber stuff.
Hmm. And Crazy Kong is a name that's already associated with the Donkey Kong series through that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Crazy Climber's already sort of connected to Donkey Kong this way. And that's not just me making a stretch. Later Donkey Kong games will further reference Crazy Climber. So I'm going to take it and since I make the side, I get to do this, that every subsequent Crazy Climber, um, due to the inclusion of Crazy Kong, who is in, I think, every single one of them except one of the LCD handhelds,
Mm,
that this is basically just further adventures of Donkey Kong Sr.
I'm very happy with that. Yeah, I like that a lot. Do you want to go into those back references at this point, or when they come up in the timeline?
Um, you know what? Let's get into them now. We can make note of when they actually come out in our timeline of releases as when we're going through things. But yeah, let's talk about them now real quick while we're still on sort of the original grouping of things.
Mm,
So in 1994, before Donkey Kong Country came out and as sort of part of the reboot of Donkey Kong as a franchise that was going to be getting paid attention to, they made a Game Boy game called Donkey Kong, commonly referred to as Donkey Kong 94,
mm,
which included the new design of Donkey Kong with the tie and the hair thing and yada yada yada. But this one was Donkey Kong Senior. It was an expanded remake of the arcade game, and by that I mean the first four levels of the hundred or so the game features mimic the arcade game in design, though Mario has a greatly expanded move set, which was then borrowed in Super Mario 64 because it was so good.
mm-hmm. Triple
And
jumps and so
then,
on.
yeah, the game goes for another, 96 levels.
This is also the debut of Pauline's modern design that she's
Yes,
had to the present day.
a lot of redesigns in this game. Well, I suppose she now has the new Mayor Pauline design, but yeah,
Yeah, but it's still building off
um,
that same basic
that's true. Her
thing.
singer alternate ego identity, singer Pauline, is still that design. But yes,
Mm-hmm.
in Donkey Kong 94, they give Donkey Kong Sr. an expanded repertoire of attacks he can do in the boss stages where you
Mm-hmm.
face off against him as Mario, including pounding the ground and sending down really familiar looking dumbbells and broken off girders in the
I
exact
see.
same attack that Crazy Kong uses in the Crazy Climber games.
That is very well spotted. Good.
And then, even later, in what was a really deep pull at this point, when Donkey Kong guest starred in the Wii U version of Skylanders Superchargers alongside Bowser.
Mm.
He has a snazzy new jumpsuit and
Yeah.
an expanded repertoire of movesets, one of which is a short term super mode called Super Kong, where he puts on some boxing gloves and some snazzy yellow shorts and starts pounding the ground, causing a rain of dumbbells and broken off girders to come down from the sky. So,
I
once
see.
again, this becomes one of his special attacks.
And keep that boxing glove thing in mind. We're going to come back to that.
Yes, yeah. So,
Wow.
yeah, Donkey Kong games directly referencing the Crazy Climber stuff in turn. So yeah, we're in a bit of a feedback loop at this point, as you can see.
Mm.
Like the Crazy Climber games reference Donkey Kong a little bit, and Donkey Kong references Crazy Climber a little bit, and I'm very comfortable just saying that yeah, Crazy Kong is the same Kong from the arcade Donkey Kongs, i.e. Donkey Kong Senior, i.e. Cranky Kong, which actually fits
I'm convinced.
nicely. Yeah, yeah, it works out, especially since when you get to the Famicom release, he's going gray on the cover of the game. I like it. Although they reverse that in later games, but it's fine. Let's see. So, we've gone from 1980 to 1985, from
Mm.
Crazy Climber to Ice Climber, which
Do you
brings
want to
us
do
to
the LCD game at this point?
ooh, right. Some LCD games came out during this period. Two of them, I believe.
I think
No,
just one,
sorry.
because, yeah.
One LCD game and a board game. That's what it was.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know. Do you want to take the wheel on these?
Sure. Well, I see the first game described as a VFD game, which is just a reference to a different kind of display technology. But it's the same kind of unit that you saw a lot at the time in terms of take home handheld conversions of console and arcade games. So Donkey Kong itself has a lot of games like this that we've covered
Hmm.
before.
I believe Donkey Kong actually has one of these VFD models. Now that I think about it.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, so this one in 1981 was made by Bandai,
Mm.
although it was ported, to other regions by different publishers and stuff. But yeah, it's just what you might expect. It's Crazy Climber,
Hmm.
but smaller
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
with limited animation and stuff like that.
Hmm.
But what's interesting about it is it has the twin stick thing because, of course, all these units are made bespoke with their control schemes.
Hmm.
So they were able to support that twin stick movement in a way that home conversions often weren't.
Hmm.
Although
Yeah.
they tried some interesting things from time to time, which we'll talk about. Yeah, it's also sort of relegating gameplay to the left half of the screen for some reason. I'm not sure. Because the
Eh.
arcade game had a little miniature model of the building on the left to show you your overall progress.
Hmm.
But it was a very thin line. It looks like, oh wait, no, I've misread the unit. It's yeah, the gameplay portion is centralized, but sort of the cityscape extends off to the right onto the frame of the unit itself.
Yeah. I
Okay,
think it's a
so
nice touch using
yeah,
the actual frame of the unit like that.
yeah, it's cool.
Hmm.
Um, and as for the board game, I don't know much about it.
Yeah. It's an old board game. It looks. I honestly have no idea how this works. It's a complex board that's just a giant. A checkerboard isn't quite right because it's got way more tiles than that, but it's emulating all the windows that you climb
Hmm.
up, and there appear to be like a deck of cards you draw that determines sort of which directions and how many forward you get to move, and like where obstacles are coming from and whether you come across X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, there's also a quite complex spinner system that determines what action you take.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here. I suspect it's like most, video game, board game adaptations where it's like the concept is neat, might be good for a round or two, probably never coming back to it. Way more complicated than it needs to be. Oh, I see. This is actually a
Right.
stand-up board, and the little plastic figurines hang off the
Yeah,
windows.
that was the most
So
fascinating thing about it to me.
that's cool. I'd love playing around with that if I'd had this as a kid, because that's
Mm.
exactly the sort of shit I go in for. um,
You get this big cardboard unit in the box that then stands up on its own. So it's a
mhm.
vertically oriented board game, which I think is extremely rare.
Oh, the spinner is a giant like parachute sort of thing being held by police
Oh,
officers, like a
yeah,
net to catch people,
that's
and
cute.
all. Yeah, nice. Yeah. So yeah, it's a board game. Also came out in 1981, we think. Can't quite
Yep.
verify that. So yeah,
Also published by Bandai,
yeah. Can't wait
toy
to find
manufacturer.
out as soon as we finish recording that there was like a game book or something. So yeah, original, 1980, 1981, lots of Crazy
Mm.
Climber stuff. 81 to 85, lots of Nintendo ripping off Crazy Climber. 85 is where Nihon Busan started making Crazy Climber again, and the first entry never came out, at least not at the time, not for like 10
Yeah,
years.
yeah.
Crazy Climber 85, actually called that, unlike Donkey Kong 94, which isn't actually called that, would have been an arcade game. Basically, just an update of the original with better graphics. Just
Yep,
better graphics all around.
it does look nicer.
Yep.
The climber himself now wears something a bit more complex than a bland green jumpsuit. Um,
Yeah.
they also added power ups, which is a nice new
Mm-hmm.
mechanical thing. So, like a helmet to protect you from the flower pots and
Mm-hmm.
various other things.
Mm-hmm. Oh, they also improved. Did we mention?
Mm.
This game had recorded voice clips.
Oh, yeah,
In
that's
the
right.
original, which was also a big deal because most of the time you could just do beeps or boops, and this actually had like the climber going "ow" or "help me" and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell because they're so heavily crunched to
Mm-hmm.
get onto the old arcade
Very
boards. But
crunchy audio. I love it. Uh,
I think what it is some unseen person saying "gambare," like "go for it, keep
yeah,
going,"
yeah, yeah.
and the climber saying "ite" when he gets hit by something, which is just ouch.
But 85 also had improved voice
Yes,
clips. So,
yes. So I played through that this morning. So it is playable, even though it was never released. I don't know if the arcade version has been dumped or anything, but it was included on a compilation title. So in 1995, Nichibutsu put out the Nichibutsu Arcade Classics
mm-hmm.
on both Super Nintendo and PlayStation 1. The SNES version has a quite faithful port of the original arcade game, but exclusive to the PlayStation version, they included Crazy Climber 85, a game that hadn't actually been released at that point, but it was
Yeah,
still a classic, I
crazy.
guess.
Hey, I'm glad they did it.
I played through it this morning to try and get a feel for the changes because it's very under documented, this port especially.
A lot of this
Um,
series is very
yeah,
underdocumented.
and I did confirm that Kong is present and he still looks like a weird gremlin creature.
but
They hadn't
but
quite got
less
that
of a
right yet.
weird gremlin creature.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
definitely an improvement.
they get better at it. They
Yeah.
get better at it the next year because 1986 was when the Famicom version of Crazy Climber came out. The graphics are simplified because this is the Famicom version, but whereas the original and 85 had the 4 skyscrapers you go up, the Famicom version has 8, um, an additional 4 with new layouts. Um, and it also came in a large box for a Famicom game that included special controller peripherals because the way you played this game was with both the first and second player controllers holding them like you would hold a Wii nunchuck or a
Mm-hmm.
Joy-Con, and the peripheral are little snap-on joysticks to go over the D-pads. And so you'd hold the controllers sideways with the D-pads at the top with these little joysticks to emulate the joysticks on the arcade machine. And that was how you would play this game.
It's fascinating. They really went all out with this conversion.
They didn't have to simplify the control scheme at all because the control scheme's already so simple.
Mm.
So, yeah.
As long as you have the two D pads. And of course, a Famicom comes with two controllers attached to it by
Yeah.
default.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you say the graphics were simplified, but in some cases they've improved things. Like the climber again has been given a more distinctive outfit
Mm-hmm.
with suspenders and a snazzy hat. Um,
Mm-hmm.
although he has chosen to forego a shirt, I think in this case.
Oh my.
I don't know if that helps the climbing, but particularly for this version and for our interest, the gorilla has seen a huge facelift.
Yeah, it's huge facelift. As we mentioned, Cranky's going gray, but he's also gotten a graphical update.
Yeah, he looks a lot more like a gorilla and a lot nicer in this version. They've also gone to the extent of giving him this, and here we're going to come back to this theme, the boxing outfit. He's wearing black boxing gloves and trunks and boots for
Mm-hmm.
some reason. I really don't know why, but
Yep.
that's what he's wearing. Yeah, and even in subsequent stages, they actually replace Kong with other monsters. So I skipped around in footage a bit and saw
Ooh,
what looked like some kind of Godzilla knockoff, as well
nice.
as like a UFO, and later there was an Oni type ogre creature as well.
Wow, I haven't actually done a whole lot of research into this version. I should go do that, I guess.
Yeah, this is the thing. The Famicom version has so many differences and enhancements that it's effectively, a new game in the series in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. I fully
Yeah,
support this interpretation. So that was 86. Let's see. 88 brings us to the actual second arcade game, Crazy Climber 2. We mentioned that
yeah,
Crazy Climber 85 had better graphics than the original Crazy Climber. Well, Crazy Climber 2 has way better graphics
way better.
than the
Yeah,
original Crazy Climber. I'd say it's like going from the Atari to the Super Nintendo.
wow.
Look at them.
Well,
Like,
Crazy Climber did get an Atari port, and it's noticeably worse than the arcade
okay,
version. But
that's
I see your
fair.
point.
Yeah, yeah. Crazy
Yeah.
Climber 2 is just way more detailed. The sprite work has just had a lot more put into it. There's a lot more going on the screens. There's a lot more features and things going on. Like there's now clotheslines with clothes moving around, things flying by, multiple different types of people sticking their head out the window and doing
Mm.
various things, or other body parts out the windows. Um,
Yeah, they're not all antagonistic. You can poke your head in on a pretty lady and she kisses you in this version.
Yeah, that brings us to the other thing about Crazy Climber 2. It's a lot more risque.
Mm,
um,
yeah, one of the first things you see is a giant billboard with of a half clad woman moving her legs around. The billboard moves its legs,
yeah, one
and
of
that's a
those.
hazard for you,
Mhm.
which is cool. But yeah, she's very as you say, risque.
It's advertising some skin lotion that it says is good for the bust.
Yeah,
Um,
it does say that. When I looked up
yeah,
info
yeah.
on Nichibutsu, apparently one of the things they're well known for is their strip mahjong games, which helped us get a bit more context on this kind of content. I
It's
think.
like, oh, yeah, that tracks. Okay. Uh, So yeah, risqueness aside, I
Mm,
think it's a much better game than the original Crazy Climber. Like the original Crazy Climber is really good. It's also really rough, and I don't think it's
mm.
aged super well.
Yeah, it's
Um,
quite bare bones as well.
yeah, bare bones. That's what I mean. Like it's not a bad game. There's just not a whole lot going on. It's amazing for its time, but by more modern standards, there could stand to be a bit more meat in the meal. Crazy Climber 2 delivers that. A lot more going on.
Mm.
Yeah, Kong and the Condor look great. The game looks great.
Yeah, I noted that Kong in the game is now grey, which
Mm-hmm.
matched the Famicom cover art that we
Yep, he's
noticed.
great. He's got a bit more going on. Like he now has a actual pile of bricks he throws from. He has some more attacks. He can hop from side to side of the building and do some other things.
Mm.
88 was it for a bit. In 93, we had a video game anthology collection for the Sharp X,
68,000.
68,000,
Yeah.
that had Crazy Climber 1 and 2 on it.
Yeah, I tried to find footage of that. There's a fair bit of footage of the Crazy Climber 1 conversion in that collection, but I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't find any for the second one. So, as far as
Oh,
I can tell, they're just pretty faithful arcade conversions.
okay. The
Yeah,
Sharp X was pretty good for that sort of thing.
it was. Yeah.
In 94, we had Donkey Kong for the Game Boy that had the Crazy Climber references in it that we already mentioned. Um,
And 95 had the Ninja Butsu Arcade Classics
mhm.
collections on
Yes.
PlayStation and SNES.
And then in 96,
Mm-hmm.
the series moved to the PlayStation. So, the first PlayStation entry was super ambitious. It's called Hyper Crazy Climber, and it just goes balls to the wall. There's now like a pseudo fantasy setting. There's multiple playable characters, one of which is an elf. The first
One's a robot.
stage, yeah, there's an elf and a robot and a climber. The first stage is like a fantasy tower that you're climbing. Is it a fantasy tower, or is it the mountain area? I can't remember. It's been a while since I've actually played it. But yeah,
It's very rocky.
there's a world map and multiple stages. Each tower you climb has a completely different look to it. One of them is still the skyscraper with Kong in his boxing gloves, though. Don't worry, he's still there.
He is still
The
there,
Condor
yes.
is also here too. But yeah, one of the reasons I was surprised when Milo was going over the new stuff in the Famicom version is I'm like, wait, some of those things are in Hyper Crazy Climber on the
Hmm.
PlayStation. So I love that there's some series continuity there. They brought back those additional creatures and boss mobs for this Hyper Crazy Climber game. And yeah, it's got FMV cutscenes where your character is being ferried around by hot air balloons. They're not riding in the hot air balloon, they're just sort of hanging on to the bottom of it and getting dumped off in new locales. This did not get an English release. I have
Hmm.
no idea what the plot is, if there even is a plot. I'm going to import this at some point and translate the manual.
That would
Um,
be nice.
it's it's crazy. I love it. I love everything about this game.
Yeah, it's a huge leap forward. It can't be understated. The theming of this
Hmm.
really sets it apart from all the rest of the series because after this, they return to this kind of city setting.
Yeah.
Um, the pixel art is amazing. It just looks
Hmm.
gorgeous.
It's
Uh,
so beautiful.
and
Um,
especially with all the new settings and
hmm.
stuff.
They also simplified the controls a tad.
Yeah, this is great. This is the first one I tried because I was so taken by the art in the screenshots.
Hmm.
But it's before I'd really learned how to actually control the game properly. It's worth noting that, on the PlayStation as well as, well, it had already, I guess, been on the SNES by this point. But these controllers have a four-way face button configuration as well as a D-pad.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
you can sort of mimic the dual arcade stick
Hmm.
control scheme of the original game much better than you could on previous ports.
Yeah.
I don't really know how other ports did it at the time, but with this one, along with the controller allowing for that, it also has control options in the settings
Mm.
for doing a more simplified scheme where it's easier to climb, but the trade off is you can't go down anymore because they've rearranged how it works. But
Hmm.
yeah, it just makes it seem like a really great entry point to the series,
Yeah.
despite being Japanese only, of course.
Hmm. Yeah. As we said, they went back to sort of just the skyscraper setting after this. The game immediately following this in 1997 being the next LCD game. This time
Oh,
a
yes.
little egg-shaped
Yeah,
handheld.
it looks like Bandai is pretty much just reusing their Tamagotchi molds
Yeah, it does kind of
for the
look like
game,
that, doesn't it?
the unit layout. Yeah.
Yeah, not a lot to that. It's got more going for it than the VFD model did. I've confirmed that the Condor shows up in this. I assume Kong is in it. He's on the
Oh, you think?
actual. Well, he's on the art. Not the art on the
Yeah.
packaging. He's on the art on the actual egg. So I would assume he's in it.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's just false advertising.
Well, I assumed he's not in it. It's not uncommon for this kind of
Mm,
accompanying thing on a more primitive system to use the same key art or similar key art from the
I
main versions to
suppose
promote it.
that's fair.
I
Um,
just I just don't see that happening with a sprite that big in this game. We've
yeah.
got a couple of YouTube videos of people playing it, but they don't go that far.
Hmm.
Yeah, I just don't see where there's space on screen for Kong to appear.
Yeah, that's fair. Let's see. As we mentioned,
Hmm.
the main thing we were talking about going back to the skyscraper setting is Crazy Climber 2000, which did not
Woo.
come out in. Oh, okay, it did come out in 2000. Sometimes they call these things 2000 and they came out in like 1998. But this one actually
Yeah.
did come out in 2000. Still for PlayStation. Transitioned to 3D this time. Just the skyscraper setting again. But it does have a rather interesting mechanic in that you now have access to all four faces of the building, and you can,
Hmm.
if you go to the side, you don't just fall off the building, you rotate to the next face of the building. So you kind of have to be aware of obstacles coming from those sides as well. Because, for instance, I know in like the second or third level, you can rotate over to the side and get in the way of like a freight elevator that's coming down.
Oh wow.
So you kind of got to be aware of those things or keep them in mind.
Hmm.
Um, it's kind of rough 3D graphics as
Oh
far as
yeah.
these
Yeah.
days goes. There was a trade off. They couldn't go super detailed with it because there's so many points of articulation on the climber. You know what I mean? Like you have to
Yeah.
move like jointed arms, jointed legs, and they wanted to still be able to do like head animations and stuff when he gets hit
Hmm.
and moves around. The rest of it's super primitive, like the people sticking their heads out the windows are really blocky with just sort of rectangle arms that heave refrigerators and stuff at you. Um,
Yeah, and Kong himself is brown now, but he's very low poly and blocky.
yeah, low
Yeah.
poly and blocky. I noticed some, yeah, lots of did the returning elements from previous
Did they return
games.
the baby elephant walk? I don't know.
Uh, I suspect not. We were
Yeah.
well past the point of using not original music at this point. It's a fine game.
Mm.
If 2000 and Hyper had come out in the opposite order, I would have been fine with it. But this coming out after Hyper just makes me really disappointed. You know
Yeah,
what
it
I
really
mean?
illustrates that shift at the time where pixel based 2D games were kind of reaching their peak and becoming so incredibly good looking. But 3D was the wow factor that was so popular.
Yeah,
But
I'm just
looking
gonna go
back on it
back
now,
to
the
that.
3D is just so rough and it just looks
Hmm.
terrible. It really didn't
That
age well.
Castlevania
Um,
64 Symphony of the Night
the
thing.
rivalry, yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Um, and that in particular is what disappoints me about this shift to 3D at this point, because up till now, Crazy Climber as a series has always been about this really fluid animation that supports the articulation that you have on your limbs.
Hmm.
Even ports like to the Atari 2600 have a lot of frames of animation for the climber, so it's always been really impressive in that way.
This still does have a lot of points of articulation on the climber. Like, you didn't lose
Sure,
anything here,
yeah, that's
but
true.
they
Yeah.
also didn't improve it much. Like, I likened it to Assassin's Creed before, and that's not
Mm.
actually that far off, because Assassin's Creed made a big deal of its climbing back when it first
Mm.
came out. But that's literally all this game does.
Mm.
Like, if you just had Assassin's Creed Climb the Tower edition, that's what this would be. And Assassin's Creed climbing is a lot better than this. I get that this was PlayStation 1, but like this is literally all you do in the game. You could have
That's
improved
true.
it a little bit, I
Oh,
think.
speaking of all you do in the game, that's something that we actually neglected to mention for the Famicom port. It's got a new gameplay mode. There's stages in between the climbing the building bits
Oh,
where you do a
right.
little 2D
Yeah.
platformer room,
Right, right.
which I don't think is something the series ever returned to.
I want to say not. Um
Yeah.
Hyper Crazy not. Yeah, Hyper had some more stuff going on for it just because it was hyper and crazy. But I don't think I can't actually remember. Those bonus rooms might have been one of them. I really need to sit down with that game
Yeah,
again.
that's the one that I'm going to most focus on after this. I didn't
Yeah.
have time to do it before the episode.
Let's see. After that.
May I, in 1999, just to sidestep a second,
Oh, right, right.
um,
Yeah.
there was a new port of Crazy Climber to a hot new modern system, the Wonder Swan by Bandai.
The Wonder Swan was a
Um,
hot new modern system, and nothing topped it until the DS. You can at me. You can quote me. GBA should not have won that fight. Um,
well, there are features of the Wonder Swan that really play well into the design of Crazy Climber.
they do,
So
yes.
one of the cool features of the Wonder Swan is it had a horizontally orientated screen, but you could then rotate the system, and
Mm-hmm.
if the game supported it, play stages vertically or play the whole game vertically in the case of things like Rainbow Islands, Putty's
Yeah.
Party. So for vertically oriented platformers like this, especially ones that are, coming from arcades where the screens were vertically oriented as well, it's a really good match for the design of the original game,
Mm-hmm.
as well as supporting the control scheme similar to the SNES and the PlayStation. When you hold it upright, you've got two basically identical D-pads
Mm-hmm.
that just work well with that control scheme. So the Wonder Swan port, strangely, is like one of the best conversions I think from the arcade game.
Yeah,
Mm.
although it is basically a straight conversion of the arcade game, it doesn't really have any of the improvements from later entries in the series.
Yeah,
Uh,
when you go to the front menu, there's two options for arcade mode and Wonder Swan mode, but I don't really know what they add in Wonder Swan mode because from the gameplay that I saw, it looked pretty similar.
yeah,
No new
yeah.
added bells or whistles that I could
Hmm.
tell. Yeah, maybe just a different design for the building or something. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? And yeah, let's see. That was 1999 and 2000. Yeah, that was it for a while. In 2007, we had yet another LCD handheld, this time from APOC. This one's a bit more basic. I don't know.
It
Given
looks really similar to the Bandai Egg, but there's subtle differences about it that at first I thought it was direct reusing of the tech in a new shell, but it's slightly different, but it's not really hugely different.
Honestly, I'm a little disappointed given some of the other stuff from APOC I've seen. While I
Mm.
was doing some preliminary research on this, I came across like an APOC LCD game called Space Time Maze, which is like a 3D Doom style maze with monsters running around on an LCD screen. And I'm like, holy crap, that's amazing. And then I look back over at this Crazy Climber game and I'm like, this is not so amazing.
Yeah, and this is 2007 that they're releasing this.
Yeah. Think
You could
like
really have gone
really
further with it.
basic, like Game and Watch tier of thing.
Yeah,
Um,
bit of a throwback, I think. And
mm,
for all we know, it might be a repackaging of an earlier Epoch
that's true. It could be.
version of this game,
The
but
one we
we're
found
not
was from
sure.
2007, so that's what's
Yeah,
in our lists.
yeah.
We kept finding things to add to this list, literally right up until the point of recording. So I would not at all be surprised if we posted this and then just idly found like three more things. Um,
Yeah, and
but
speaking of there being a lot of material, we've just hit the 1 hour mark of recording.
oh lordy, well, I mean we're further along than I expected we'd be in an hour.
Mm,
But also we have some more stuff to go through.
that's right. Shall we?
So also in 2007 was the last new original entry in the series, Crazy Climber Wii, which is 3D again. The graphics are better than the one on PlayStation 7 years prior. The
Yeah.
characters are now sort of generic anime teens. um,
Well, they're not all teens. One of them's an old guy, and I couldn't. I found it hard to track down like the names of the characters, but I think his name is a reference to the Nichibutsu Company. Um,
okay.
yeah, so he's like a hip old guy with sunglasses. um, and there's a girl character and a robot.
Right, the robot returns from Hyper
Yes.
Crazy Climber.
Well, it
Oh
looks
man,
different, but yeah.
yeah. Crazy Climber Wii is crazy and has that sort of. Also, with the Donkey Kong connection, it's got that sort of we spray painted this title look to it that like Jungle Beat had going for it.
Mm-hmm. Was the
Um,
style of the time.
yeah, as was the style at the time. Um, Yeah, the it adjusts the camera angle, whereas Crazy Climber 2000, it had the same camera view as the arcade games, and only made use of the 3D and the sort of being able to rotate around the building. Crazy Climber Wii puts the camera sort of behind and below the character, so you're looking up the skyscraper as you scale it, which is a
Mm.
perspective I think works really well for a non vertical oriented screen, and how I would have personally done a Virtual Boy Crazy Climber game had such a thing ever been made. And if it hasn't, I'm just going to have to go look up that homebrew SDK again and get back to Virtual Boy development.
Virtual Boy also has the dual D pads
It
to facilitate the
does. It
control
would have
scheme.
been an amazing system to do this on. Long live the Virtual Boy. Fuck the haters. Um,
Do you know how the control scheme works on Wii?
you know what? I don't. I
Yeah, me either.
want to hazard
Sorry.
that it probably did like Wiimote and Nunchuck control stick and D-pad, but don't quote me on that.
I
Um,
figured it would have flicking the Wii remote's motion
oh
control stuff. Who knows?
God. Oh, it could have. You might be right.
Oh, if I could see
Uh,
the back of the box, I could tell you.
mm.
Uh, I do know that this did get an arcade port.
Oh God, you're right. Yeah, you move the controllers from side to side or up and down to emulate the climbing. Okay. Slightly less excited to play this. Oh, I see it supports 4 players. Nice.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
Looks like it has 11 stages.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Interesting power ups and enemies. Also has Kong in it. He's on the cover. Like I said,
Of course.
oh, the Condor's on the cover too. Every entry in the series has either the Condor or Kong on the box art, except for Crazy Climber 2000. Truly the black sheep of the family. um,
So I'm looking at the flyer for the arcade version, which has been renamed to Taiken Crazy Climber.
mm,
I'm trying to figure out how exactly you control it. It looks like it's uh, made for single player, but the copy kind of calls it the rolling grip controller. But from the picture, I just really can't figure out how it was supposed to work.
wait, which version are you looking at?
So Crazy Climber Wii was ported to arcade as Taiken Crazy Climber.
Oh, I did not know that. Wow.
Here, I'll send you a picture
Interesting.
of the flyer. That's the website that it's on.
Let's take a look at this real quick.
That bottom right
Taiken Crazy
screenshot
Climber.
has kind of rotating symbols. So
Oh,
it might be that
okay.
you're gripping two rollers and moving
So
them.
so what those look like to me are
Mm.
sort of rotating things that emulate the ledges you're grabbing onto. So
Oh
you need
wow! So they're that big and they spin
yeah.
around.
Oh, I kind
That's
of
cool.
love that actually. Oh my god. Um that was also 2007 from what it says here.
Yes,
Also, Kong just straight up looks like a gorilla, modeled after a real life gorilla. Does not
yes.
have King Kong proportions anymore. And yeah, like we said, skyscraper aesthetic, kind of boring. Like they spiced it up a little with sort of anime character designs, but it's only the character designs. Does not extend to the enemies or the skyscrapers.
Well, there's a few
Um,
variant stages. One was called like Ironworks or something.
Yeah, I see that like they go into different styles of building here, but
Yeah, but they are buildings.
nothing as exciting as Hyper Crazy Climber.
Agreed.
So,
Yeah, and along with the camera perspective that's behind you, I think the gameplay's been made more sort of action, dynamic kind of thing. There's a combo meter and like,
hmm yeah.
yeah,
Like
very
I mean,
propulsive
props
kind of
for
thing.
trying to change it up a bit, make it more
Mm-hmm.
exciting and keep
Yeah,
the
for sure.
series alive. I respect that. I think you could have done better in the aesthetics department, but like,
Yep.
hey, you kept the series going for 27 years. So, not really going to complain about that. Unfortunately, that's kind of been it. Like,
Mm.
it got ported to PlayStation 2 a couple years prior than that, and then PlayStation 4 a couple years after that. We
Mm.
got a Virtual Console port in 2010,
It's part of the Arcade
part of the
Archives
Arcade
releases these
Archives
days.
releases,
Yeah.
I think in 2018. The Skylanders Superchargers reference in 2015, but everyone's just going to assume that's a reference to DK94.
We know better.
The most crazy thing about Crazy Climbers stuff since Crazy Climber Wii, pun intended, is a cameo playable character appearance in Cave Story 3D in 2011.
This makes no sense to me.
It makes no sense. There was, I think, there was some partnership going on with uh,
Well, with
Falcom
Falcom,
or
yeah.
yeah.
So I guess Falcom had acquired this IP at some point, perhaps? I don't really know. Oh, but Icky is from Sunsoft.
I don't know. Maybe they just had a bunch of
What?
yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going on there. Yeah, the Crazy Climber in sort of their Famicom look is a playable character in
Yes.
Cave Story 3D. They are not in 3D. They're just a little sprite. It's a bonus thing.
Yeah.
Japanese version only.
Mm-hmm.
Can't do this in the English versions. I have no idea if there's any story explanation for it. Um, crazy Cave Story 3D is not well documented
Mm.
within the Cave Story community because it's generally regarded as a poor port of the game that was done kind of without the original creator's involvement.
Yep.
So, yeah, I don't know what's going on there. One good thing about this is it gives us a clear through line in that The cave story stuff plays a heavy part in the fighting game Blade Strangers, which also featured a prominent role of the Umihara Kawase characters, and that's our connection to Umihara
Ding ding ding
Kawase.
ding 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 ding.
We got there. Our
Nailed it.
5 stages from Kevin Bacon. Um,
Yes, every
um,
future episode of this podcast is going to link back to Umihara Kawase.
I bet we could if we really tried. But it's probably just going to be the Crazy Climber connection. Like, how many steps to Crazy Climber, and then Blade Strangers, and we had a concept. But yeah, like, that's it. I think 2018's Arcade Archives release was the last time the series has popped up. I would be happy to be wrong about that. In fact, I'm going to do a really quick Google search just to make sure nothing's come out since the pandemic started, since we started making notes for this episode a while ago.
I'm doing a quick search to see who's in the copyright notices for the Arcade Archives
Ooh, you know what?
release.
That's
But
a
it just says
good.
Hamster.
Who
Hamster's the
knows?
ones who make the Arcade Archives ports.
That's true, and they were the ones who handled the 2005 PS2 release as well. So
Oh,
yeah, I
okay,
don't
cool,
know.
cool, cool.
Yeah, it looks
As for
like.
Nichibutsu, the company was disbanded in 2015.
Oh no!
Oh, there's a note here. In 2014, Nihon Busan sold its video game library to Hamster.
Oh,
So
well,
Hamster's now the
okay.
owner of the property.
Oh, like I said, we're always finding out new things. One new thing I just found out while looking to
Yes.
see if there's anything we missed was that the 1982 Spider-Man game was a Crazy Climber clone. Um,
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can see it.
ah, that's crazy. This was the Atari one. This
For
one
the Atari. Oh
was
yeah,
published by
definitely.
Parker Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
Designed by
was
Laura Nikolic.
yeah.
Awesome.
Ooh,
Yeah, it adds like web swinging to the
she
mechanics
also
along with the
did
climbing.
Frogger 2 3D. Nice.
No way.
Yeah, that's great. Props to them. Um,
Awesome.
Yay, recognition of women in game development.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so yeah, it looks like
Thumbs up, thumbs
2018
up.
was it, but the glorious legacy of Crazy Climber continues to go forward with the Donkey Kong series and Ice Climber is being prominent Smash Bros. Roster seat fillers, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And the control scheme legacy continues in the indie games that I was talking about,
that's
like
true.
Octodad and Surgery Simulator and
Mm-hmm.
things
Yep.
like that. There's even a follow up to QWOP that is a rock climbing thing called GURP, which is a bit different. You use different letters
But it is a
for
rock
moving
climbing
up,
thing,
but yeah.
so very
So in that
crazy
way, it really
climber.
prefigured like a big trend that has only relatively recently taken off in gaming, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But yeah, crazy climber. Like I said at the top of the hour, way more to this series than I bet you were expecting.
For sure.
Yeah, we actually went through that a bit faster than I was expecting.
That's
Um,
good.
yeah,
So
that
now
is
let's
good.
talk about Crazy Kong. Just kidding. Oh no, what was the other one we're gonna do? Jumpman.
Jumpman. Yeah,
Yeah, we've
Jumpman has
separated
its
that.
own control. Here
We're
it
gonna
is.
do Jumpman in another
Yeah,
episode.
Jumpman another episode. I also realized we haven't done an episode about Congo Bongo
Mm.
somehow. Um,
I'm sure we've mentioned it here and there.
oh, I'm sure we have too. Well then, shall we move along to our shoutouts?
Yes, let's do it. That was a good discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
So what have you got to shout out today?
My shout out today is an arcade inspired throwback game called Annalyn, which you can find on Steam and some other platforms. It's very, think a cross between Donkey Kong Jr., and Pac Man.
Hmm. Maybe a bit of Mario Brothers.
Maybe a bit of Mario Brothers. It's stars Annalyn. She's in a little sort of blue color mining gear, very Mario-ish outfit, but it's light blue on dark blue, little headlamp, and she's got a pickaxe. The pickaxe sort of acts as her hammer. She can pick up one as a power up and do the little do 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 do. All the tunes a little different for copyright reasons. Um, you go around the stages. They're not quite single screen, but they're very small and contained. You're picking up little gold nuggets. There's little snakes that follow you around, similar to the Pac-Man ghost, but this is a platformer. Some of the stages have ropes or things hanging from the ceiling that you can climb in a very DK Junior style way. Exact same poses and animation and mechanics. You pick up little food power ups, try to collect all the pellets on a stage before moving on to the next one. The snakes have little Pac-Man ghost-esque names. There's Randy, Candy, Handy, and Mike. um, and yeah, it's fun. It's cheap. It's $5. I
Mm-hmm.
recommend it. Yeah,
And it's adorable.
it is adorable. I'm just gonna headcanon this is Mario's kid.
Yeah, spelling ANNALYNN if you're curious, but we will have a link in the description as well.
Yes, yes. Yeah, it's
Cool.
only been out for like a year and a half, so yeah, go play it.
Mm, mm. Good pick.
And what is your shout out for the episode?
Wow. Lately I've been face down in a lot of Zelda stuff. Is that a good way to put it? It's like I'm drowning in Zelda. Yeah, that's a good thing.
Mm,
Um,
Drowning in Zelda is a good thing.
this has been helped a lot by Melora of History of Hyrule, who has lately been really ramping up her scanning and preservation projects. So she's been a long time preserver of and enthusiast about Zelda stuff. Her website, History of Hyrule, goes back many, many years. And she's especially been prominent in archiving printed material like manga,
Yeah.
game books, and even rare artwork in magazines and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
She was also behind a lot of fan efforts to get the Akira Himekawa official manga localized, as well as Hyrule Historia, the book,
Mm-hmm.
which were both successful. So, yeah, she's done a lot of great things for the Zelda community over the years. But yeah, the thing I'm plugging as of late is her recent scans. She got hold of like a better scanner and has been diligently making really high quality scans of all the publications that she's collected and
Mm-hmm.
books and stuff. And this has led to me doing things like getting interested in the game books. There's 7 Japanese language game books for Zelda that were never localized and are highly underdocumented. So I know that people, based on her scans, have been playing these recently, and I've managed to get a hold of summaries of them and used those in the scans to fill out the Zelda wiki articles for these game books, which hopefully brings some more awareness to them, because there's some really cool stuff in there. Like 2 of them have Zelda as a playable character.
Nice.
One has a really whack twist that you will not see coming. Hmm. Find out which one.
One of them
Anyway,
features Ganon's brother.
that's right, Ganon's younger brother. So Mirage Castle is often the one that is talked about a lot. It's probably the best of them in terms of gameplay. That's one where Zelda and Link both are usable characters and they swap off
Mm-hmm.
between them. And yeah, it's like a new story. Some of them are kind of adaptations of the games, but some of them, like Mirage Castle, are original stories too. So that's cool. Anyway, I'm just going to plug her website, go to History of Hyrule, and like the top few links on the front page are to things that she's been doing recently, like the archive.org scans of complete publications. A lot of cropped and cleaned art gets put on her Flickr, and she talks about it a lot on Twitter. So you check out all those links and yeah, get interested in some obscure Zelda stuff.
Yeah. I would also recommend that. It's good stuff.
Cool.
And yeah, I think that will bring us to the end of another episode. Thank you for coming with us on this crazy journey.
And thank you, Gibbon, for hosting and doing all that work on the show notes document.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun with this. It was nice sort of researching this series. I was vaguely aware of some of the entries and less so on others. I discovered some entries that I absolutely fell in love with like Hyper Crazy Climber.
Mm, yeah.
Um, and yeah, it's just great being able to go, hey, look at all these games with Donkey Kong in them. This series that went from 1980 to 2007 and is still getting at least ports and re-releases, if nothing else. So like, yeah, it's still going strong in 2018. Like, I
Mm.
don't think we've gone longer than a few years without some sort of release. So yeah.
And it's a sub series within Donkey Kong.
Well,
Yeah.
I guess you could argue that Donkey Kong is a series of this, similar to how Mario is
Oh,
technically a series of Donkey Kong.
here we
But
go.
yeah.
So, okay. Yes. So, Super Mario is a spin off of Crazy Climber.
What's the
Woohoo.
furthest out we can get? Is it Rhythm Heaven?
Could be, yeah.
Rhythm
Rhythm
Heaven to
Heaven.
WarioWare to Wario Land to Super Mario Land to Super Mario Bros. To Mario Bros. To Donkey Kong to Crazy Climber.
Now they just need to give the wrestler his own game, I guess.
Something like that.